So warm welcome to the Audit Standards Committee on Tuesday, 11th of July. We're on the white room, as you know. Sadly, I went to the pool and saw most of you did as well. But thank you for all attending today. So we'll kick off with apologies, please.
Apologies, Chair, from the Vice Chairman, Mrs. Trowbridge, and from Mrs. Sylvester Hall and Mr. Ward.
Thank you very much. Agenda item 2, declaration of interest. Anyone got any declaration of interest on the first part of the agenda? We'll go to the final costs. No, fine. Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting held on 25th of April 2023. It'll go by each page for on.
Can I just move that we accept them?
Yeah, you can, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any matters arising from those minutes? Smashing. Agenda item 4 is to note the appointment of my full council. We've got 4 members to the Service Standards Panel for 23-24. Julie?
Yeah, this was a decision in the council to appoint these 5 members when committee membership and chairmanship and so on is sorted. So I've just reported it for your information.
Okay. I'd just like to say, while we're on that, I'd just like to say a warm welcome to William, who's sitting at the back of the room. Welcome, William, to the first member of the public I've seen at my meeting, so warm welcome. Agenda item 5, update regarding the situation with the external audit division. Rachel, Debbie?
Yeah, I'll take that. This report provides information on the attached letter from the external auditors. So the attached letter, you can see an appendix that's on page 7 of this report. It briefly sets out that Ernst & Young will remain as a supplier of local public audit and also the timescales now for the delivery of the audited accounts. As members of the committee will be aware, there has been some delays experienced in the auditing of the accounts, which has been due to the accounting for the infrastructure assets. So for the Stafford County Council, we're currently outstanding the 2020-21 and 21-22 audited accounts. There has been no delays though in the auditing of the pensions fund. In terms of timescales going forward and what's set out in Ernst & Young's letter, they are hoping to progress all outstanding matters by the end of December, and that then will allow for the commencement of the 22-23 external audit. Chair, that's all I have to say on that. So we want to pass over to Sam to give any further information.
Yeah, I will pass over to that. Sam, would you like to read that numbers?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So just in terms of arrangements for Staffordshire County Council, specifically on the 21-22 audit and 2021 audit, we're working to the timescale of having those completed by the September audit committee, so in advance of the December timeline as highlighted within the letter. On the 2021 audit, there are 2 or 3 issues which the team are currently working on. The first is regarding the accounting for the left partnership funding. The second is in respect to IS19 triangle evaluation, and where as auditors we need to consider in line with the CIPRA the bulletin in terms of the impact of the triangle evaluation and considerations which local authorities need to undertake. That's been the management have actually undertaken that. We've been provided us with updated figures. We are now consulting with our internal actuaries on the impact of that issue. So the IS19 triangle evaluation and the indication for the 21-22 and 2021 audit is being considered jointly. And the third point, which is impacts on the 2021 audit, is at the time of issuing our opinion, we need to assess the going concern arrangements up to the date of signing. So that is a procedure which will need to be undertaken in respect of the 21-22 audit. Similarly, you have the IS19 trans valuation point, which I've just mentioned, and the going concern point. In addition to those 2 points for the 21-22 audit, we have yet to complete our testing on income and expenditure, and also updating our value for money procedures. And in addition to that, on the tests, the procedures that we undertake in respect of valuation of land and buildings, our team have undertaken the procedures on a number of the transactions, on a number of areas which we selected for testing. We also engaged our internal valuation specialists, and we're awaiting a response from them on the elements of the land and building population which they've reviewed on our behalf. So that is a summary of where we are for the 2021 audit and the 2022 audit. Happy to take any questions if you have any.
No, thank you, Sam. I know it's been a difficult time for you. I'm sure all members are looking forward to getting the accounts signed off, and hopefully that the timescale is given us that we can be adhered to. So in December, it will be finalised.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just in terms of evaluations and all the rest of it that you're taking at the moment, the only question I have is the evaluation at the time of the audit in the past, or is it now? Because obviously, with things have changed as they are at the moment, some of the properties that might be on the assets might have been devalued over, because that's certainly what's happened within housing. So I'm just wondering, do you take the value as it was at the time of the audit should have been 2 years ago, 1 year ago, and then obviously the next year would be up to date again? And what risks are there attached to some of these evaluations and procedures that we're now going through? If you find there's an error, what's the procedure, if there is one, of trying to rectify what may have been an auditable concern from those other accounts in the past? Lastly, just as an aside, I know one asset quite well, and that's at the Big Up Youth Zone. And it was burnt, well, it had a massive fire in it about 2 months ago, and that took me a lot of time. But is there some re-evaluation of that and having to repair that and everything else, in terms of it had to be done through the lease arrangements, but making sure that it seems to be working quite well at the moment? But again, is there risk during these evaluations of some of these buildings? Are they at risk, as well? Is that taken into account during that's more of a technical thing? But it's those first two questions, if you could answer me, the risk and the time. Thank you.
So in terms of the first two questions, what we're looking at is the valuation as at the 31st of March of the respective financial years. So we will the procedures that we're undertaking procedures to assess whether those valuations are true there at that particular day. On the point about risk and in terms of the valuation risk. So if we identify any issues in respect of valuation, whether we believe that valuations are too high or too low, we will report those. And we'll then consider the implications of those and whether or not an adjustment is required to the financial statements. In respect of valuations, because of the way that local authority accounts are prepared and the code and code exemptions, then ultimately any changes in valuations don't actually have an impact on the overall amount in terms of position with council taxpayers.
And the risk in terms of finding something.
So in terms of what's happened at the youth centre,
No, I'm talking about the idea of the auditing process itself. That was just an example.
So,
Previous question.
so we're looking at the position at the 31st of March. If there are any, significant issues which where there have been an asset that has, maybe been demolished and there's a,
I'm not-
there's a subsequent,
I'm not on about the assets as such now, the first part.
Okay.
It was about the process itself of auditing. So if during the audit of the 2021 accounts, you find that there's an error or some issue that's related to that, how does that get resolved 3 years down the line?
So if we identify an error in relation to the 21-22 accounts or the 2021 accounts, then as I said, we'll report that back to management in terms of whether or not the accounts need to be amended. And we also assess whether or not, there potentially was a prior period adjustment, which maybe where prior period balances will need to be amended. And also going forward, if it's an error which might impact on the 22-23 accounts, then we'll highlight that in terms of assessing whether or not whether or not there's an issue that needs to be rectified for ensuring that going forwards the account treatment is true and fair.
Thank you, Sam.
Thank you. Yeah.
Ray?
Thank you. So, my understanding is that there is nothing in those sets of accounts that is duly alarming to us, and they're all, if you do find anything, they're likely to be quite minor. Can you confirm that, please?
On the 2021, there would be.
But that's what you call putting the spot on the spot.
I think I took my question a bit, it's just thinking really.
So on the 2021 accounts, we identified a reclassification of short and long-term borrowing of 15 million. There's also the accounting for the net funding, which we're currently discussing with management, whether an amendment is required for that particular transaction. But they're the two issues in respect of the 2021 accounts, and in respect of the 21-22 accounts, there aren't at this stage any significant issues which
That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Steve?
Yeah, thanks. When you read through this, the fact that the accounts of 2021 haven't been signed off would raise alarm bells with me. However, when I speak to the officers in Newcastle, there is a sector-wide shortage of people like yourself. And if anybody's got a child finishing university who likes maths, this is a job for life if he wants it. Would you say that the county council was an average sort of position with these audits, or are we lagging behind where the similar authorities are? Is everybody else in the same boat as us?
Across the sector as a whole, there are issues in terms of the audit reporting and completion of audits for a variety of issues, capacity within the professions, and not just talking about EY here, but talking more generally about the profession as a whole is an issue. The points are being considered. I mean, members might be aware that there was a select committee hearing a few weeks ago where these points were being raised, and the FRC looking into the issue as well, and potentially there may well be a ministerial announcement in the near future in terms of actions that may or may not be taken. I suppose it's watch this space really in terms of.
I will also get told that you've got more hoops to jump through as well.
From a regulatory perspective, if I think back to when I first started within the audit profession, the requirements on external auditors and the work that we need to undertake in order to ensure that we're reaching the right opinion and adhering to quality standards has increased significantly. So, for example, on the evaluation of land and building, the challenge that auditors undertaking in that area, the use of our internal specialists to provide us with a view as an external, as a team, as to whether or not the evaluations are in line with the requirements of the profession. Similarly, for actuarial assessments and what's disclosed in your accounts for the pensions liability, the level of work that we need to take an engagement with our internal specialists in those areas are significantly more increased than I would have done when I first started in the profession.
Thank you. There's no further questions, so again, much appreciated you coming in person rather than Zoom meeting. I'll see you face to face, so we'll look to getting the audit finished for December, and we look forward to you coming back to us then.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Sam. Right, so we'll move on to agenda item 7, code of conduct and members having report. That's going to go with you, John.
Yeah. So, as members will know, this committee has the overarching responsibility for member standards matters within the authority. I deal with most of them on your behalf with the independent persons. We have 4 independent persons who are listed and named in the report who provide that independent perspective on those complaints. As part of that overarching responsibility, I bring a report to you every year, which gives you an update on the complaints received during that period. And that's the purpose of the report that's on the agenda today. This year's report covers that period from June 22 to June 23. So that's the year we're covering. And you'll see from the report that during that period, we received 15 complaints under the Code of Conduct against our members. When you look at it, it might look as if there's 14, but I think one of them, 22/10-11, is a complaint that was made against 2 members. So that's why you've got 15 complaints. And in terms of those complaints, 10 members during that period were the subject of complaints. So 1 or 2 of them have had more than 1 complaint during that period. And then of those complaints, after taking them through the process, discussion with the independent person, etc., none of those complaints were found to be a breach of the Code of Conduct. And one of them is still outstanding, but otherwise 14 others, none of them are a breach of the Code of Conduct. I don't think there's much more I want to say. I think, as the report says, there's nothing particularly I could pick out from those complaints that says this is the sort of thing that we need to think about. There's nothing, no real common themes about them. They are just issues that individual members of the public have, for whatever reason, found a concern to them. On the positive side, we don't get complaints against, from members against members within the authority. I think that's a good sign. I think that does suggest the authority is able to resolve types internal issues itself without using a complaints procedure, which is a positive. But beyond that, I don't think we have much more to say, except to say I'm very happy to answer any questions that members may have about the report.
If you want to ask something.
Well, it was only really, I can't say too much, I don't know whether one of these is mine or not, but anyway, it's when members have complaints about the procedures that they may be undertaken elsewhere, there doesn't seem to be a counter argument in terms of reporting back the process. I'm just concerned that and I've been quite a few of us maybe been in what I refer to as abusive situations, which weren't of our making. And how does that get reported back as a counterbalance to some of this? That's all my concerns about, really, that there's no counterbalance to some of these issues that may or may not have been reported in that way. In the case that I'll say myself, the complaint was to stop me from complaining about their conduct, not the other way around.
Well, I think that the process is a one-way street. It is about complaints about members. We don't have a process that picks up all those kind of issues where members have, are treated inappropriately by members of the public. We don't have a system for that or any regime for that. What we do, I think we are getting better, I think, at trying to support members when we do have difficult situations. And if anyone is in a difficult situation where they're being harassed or abused by members of the public, then if you do make contact with us, Kate Loader in particular, I think has got a risk assessment process in place for talking the member through the kind of issues that can be put in place to help deal with those situations. But yeah, I think the regime is specifically about about members' conduct, but I fully accept that there are perhaps increasingly issues about members of the public's conduct towards our members. We're getting more concerned about that, but there's no regime or reporting mechanism that we have in place currently for us.
Can that just be minuted for today's meeting and maybe considered in the future at some point? Because, I'm surprised about what's happening, not just with myself, but also with other colleagues. Similar meetings, some of it's politically fine. We're quite happy to take the heat. The politicians, that's fine. But when it gets to a point where we're not being listened to or it's becoming abusive, I think that's something that we do need to take consideration of in the future, or even now. I don't know what other members think, but I just think that we need to learn from these issues.
That's a fair point.
Is it, Chair?
Hang on,
I'm sorry.
Billy?
Thank you. I wasn't going to talk about this, but I just want to endorse what Councillor Flinders just said. And I really want to endorse that for somebody who's certainly been on the end of some fairly nasty stuff. By people I don't even know. So it isn't even a decision I've made or been part of. So I look at this, and I wasn't going to mention that, but you're aware of some of the, and even now I'm long-term subject to sort of low-level abuse and criticism, irregular on social media. I use social media. It's never critical. I rarely reply to anybody. Never reply to anybody and whatever. So I just want to endorse what Keith said. It is often two ways, and I think most members sitting around this table will have experienced that in some way or other. And it worries me. And I'm going off subject here. It worries me long term. It gets tougher and tougher to get good councillors, at all, and it's because of this. So to endorse what Keith said, I know I'm going off piece here, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for indulging me. But just to endorse what Keith said, it's got to work both ways. It really has. As far as this is concerned, and I'm going back now to my original question, I just wanted to endorse what Keith said. These complaints have reached you. Has there been any effort by the public to on an average of them, to try and resolve them before they reach you, John? Have there been, has there been effort? Because most of them, there's no breach of the code of conduct.
Yeah, it's one person's opinion against another.
It is, but
End of.
In answer to the question, the answer is in most cases no. That the complaints process in most of these complaints has been their first recourse in terms of that particular situation. And just picking up on the comments again that yourself and Councillor Thunder have made, we do absolutely recognise this issue of abuse towards councillors is a growing issue. And again, I've been in that for a good time. I think it's grown considerably during that period. I do think the point you make about social media is a good one. I think that's a particular area where people do feel free to be quite abusive towards members. I think there's lots of instances where you see members of the public who are disgruntled with a decision made by the council, or the fact that the council isn't taking action against something. I think that often can spark that kind of abusive behaviour towards our members. We are conscious of it. We are kind of trying to think of ways to deal with that. We're working with the local government association on that. And as I say, Kate Loader, again, very much plugged in with the local government association's work around supporting members in these situations where they are subject to harassment. I think that the truth is, though, there is a bit of a gap in terms of what can be done. It's either a police matter or it's not. And there's an awful lot of issues under that before it becomes a police matter. That means that members can be subject to quite a significant degree of harassment without there being much recourse against the individuals causing that harassment. We do our best to support members, but there's no way of getting away from the fact it's not an easy position for members to be in when they're subject to that kind of harassment, as I'm sure members around this room have experienced themselves.
Yeah, we could talk on this subject forever, and thank you for the answer, John, and thank you for the councillor for delivering it.
Did you want
Yeah,
to?
it's just a quick one really, is the confidentiality of it all, right, does that still stand as what it used to do time gone?
It is the process is entirely confidential, at least until that point where it gets to a situation where we have to bring it here for a hearing by the panel you just appointed earlier in the meeting.
Yes.
That I think has happened once or twice in my time here as monitoring officer. So that is a very rare situation. In terms of that confidentiality, though, we only control part of that. There's a complainant on the other side, so obviously that complainant and what they do with the information as part of that complaint is outside our control. But by and large, the complaints that have been made do tend to remain confidential, but one or two do get out to the public domain.
Yeah.
So, Chair, just one other thing. I'm not necessarily talking just about members. I know that some officers have been in that same situation.
Yeah.
And entrapment and everything else. And again, that's not coming back. It's not being audited. It's not part of the process. And I just think that there should be at least some counter argument on some of this. You know, in terms of even sending in well, in this case, it was to ask the CEO to resign and all, you know, I mean, it's just, it's small stuff, petty stuff, some people would say, you know, but it builds, and it is something that I just think we need to at least have some idea of knowing how bad it is. So we don't know how much worse it's getting. You said yourself, it's getting worse. We've got no measurement of or any resolution process. And I just think that's something that's missing.
It's a fair point, Chair. I'll have a look at that with colleagues. We'll see whether we can think of some way of recording some of that and bringing you a similar sort of report around that. So you can.
These officers as well, and not just.
Yeah, I get that. It will only be those that we're aware of. I think all of you will suck up a fair bit of that kind of stuff as part of your life as councillors. But there are some of those where you do feel that need to kind of come and contact us about it. That's maybe something we can keep a record of and start bringing it forward so that people can, members can keep a bit of an overview of that as well. Yeah.
Thank you. I know that you said out of the 15 complaints, there was no overall theme of the complaints.
Yeah.
But is there a theme of a particular ward of the county council? Is there a specific area that's been had more complaints in? So Moorlands versus kind of Chase, has there been anything inside?
Not that I've identified. In the past, there have been issues. So when, for example, the proposals for Cannock Chase were going through, I think that brought about a lot of complaints at that time. So when you have issues like that, which really do kind of get the public's attention, that can sometimes spark complaints. But in terms of these complaints, I don't think there's any kind of common theme in terms of areas of authority or what anything really that kind of jumps out to you.
Did you want to come back, Neil?
No. Actually, Chair, and I will come back. I will come back. It's just to my right, she's saying, "Don't I'm going to carry on anyway, Mr. Chairman." One of the things you talked about was the police, and I accept as a bar. From a personal point of view, I don't know at what stage I hit the bar till actually somebody was assaulted.
Yeah.
You know, until there was a physical attack on somebody. We in Cannock, the leader of the council, the previous leader of the council, has had her house attacked twice. That's public knowledge. You know, to be fair, there was somebody who was from another political party who was working with me and was physically attacked, as you know, almost certainly, you know, until the police arrested him, was on that list. But that had to happen. So from a personal security point of view, and I appreciate we was on the extreme end of it, from a personal security point of view, I don't know where that bar was for the police. And maybe part of the conversation should be with the police and say, because I look at our MP who's looked after incredibly well. She's got all sorts of security on her door, and quite right, that's not a criticism of that. That she got all sorts of security on her door, and when there was some quite big issues, she was given personal security for for the Remembrance Sunday and stuff like that. And for me personally, I don't think anybody ever thought we better look after me. It's a long time ago, and I'm talking generally. Rather than, I don't want to make this about me, absolutely not. This is a long time ago, it was all very sad, incredibly sad. But I think it's worth looking at and saying what stage, and everybody really stage has experienced it, it's not just me.
Yeah. We have met with the police. Kate can probably sort of tell you more about that, to try and make sure we have really good relationships with them to get the support for our politicians when they are being harassed. I just wonder whether this is a topic that we might do something more with, and that's probably something for us to take back. I'm thinking maybe if we were to have a members event at some point, this might be a small part of that. We could talk to members about that and what the kind of support is available, and discuss that with members, or some other way of kind of communicating with members about this issue and seeing whether there's something more we can do to support people. So I think it's probably best if I take that back and have a think about that. We'll think about whether we can make clearer for members those kind of things, like when you need to sort of contact us, when you should raise it with us, what kind of issues we can deal with, what support is available, when we'll bring the police in, all those kind of things. We'll try and think about how we can get some more information out to members about that. And see whether we can give you some better support around this issue, because clearly, from speaking today, it is an issue of real concern to members.
Great.
Thank you.
Just on John's point, I think you should get the Chief Constable and the EFCC to come to an event for members, and actually they have a specialist on Staffordshire Police who can advise people on note, and it doesn't have to be councillors. You could be a rock star and you still require the same help and support. For sure. And if not, IPSA, we can get somebody from IPSA to come and talk about, or perhaps should, to come and talk about security. But my security is better than my MP's. So, you can do a lot yourself to increase your security. I've got electric gates, I've got cameras, I've got alarms, and that's just an honest in the country. Thank you.
I've got two nasty dogs.
I'm just saying, I've got a life.
But finally, John, I'd just like to say, I'd like you to pass on community thanks to the 40 persons. Because I know they've got varied careers, and I know they're good help to yourself. So I'm just now some of the accident of these complaints, so pass on off.
That's the one to share.
And we'll accept the recommendation. If everyone's happy, we'll accept your recommendation.
Just one other quick thing on the panel.
Yeah.
Do you know what do we need a spare just in case some of these aren't going to be available for meetings and things like that, or is that something that you only need one or two of the members stated?
We haven't had one of the panels since.
I know.
It's so much about a spare.
No, okay, forget it.
Absolutely.
But I don't have a complaint event yet.
Thank you, John.
We'll work
Anyway,
on that one in.
We're back to you, John. Agenda item 8, proposed changes to in delegation to officers, agreed actions under Wildlife Frontside Act 1981. Over to you, John, again.
Well, I might defer this one to Julie. I think she might know more about this than I do, but just again, you're obviously responsible for the constitution. If there's sort of any little, change that need making, we often make those without bringing them here. So, for example, the legislation changes, we'll change our constitution to update the legislation. But those that have a little bit more of a, are a bit more of a substantive change, we obviously bring them here for you to look at first, and then recommend to full council, and this is one that's come through here in terms of, wildlife and countryside action.
Go on, Julie.
Can I just summarise it, Chair?
Big hand, Julie.
Hopefully the report's fairly self-explanatory.
Yeah.
It explains that we've got statutory responsibilities under section 53 of the Wildlife and Countryside Act in terms of rights of way. The legal division, Cape and obviously the legal division are dealing with a backlog of, at the time of writing the report, 290 applications. There's a time limit on which, within which they're supposed to be dealt with. In which case, if we don't deal with them, the applicant can automatically go to the Secretary of State, who can then order us to deal with them. So that just compounds the problems, really. The process and resourcing of the function is constantly under review, and the latest review has gone to Countryside and Rights of Way Planning this past couple of meetings, and they've asked for 3 changes to the scheme delegation. The first is that they want to introduce a new prioritising scheme, which is shown as Appendix B on the report, which is printed page 21 on your agenda. But you see that the lead point on that is that the Director of Corporate Services will have the discretion to exercise the power to exercise the council's discretion on whether to prioritise them. So we're asking for that to go into John's scheme of delegation. The second one is a practical one, really, in that Countryside and Rights of Way panel has to approve any proposals to pass over to a neighbouring authority the workload associated with an application if the footpath crosses 2 hours and the neighbouring authority, and maybe more of the footpath is in the next door council's area. So what we're looking for is blanket authority to delegate that work over rather than having to go straight immediately to Countryside and Rights of Way panel. So hopefully that will put some time out. And the third one was really just a tidying up of the existing delegation that John's got, which is a delegation to decide among the local members as to whether or not an application needs to go to panel. And there's a reference to the word properly in there, but there's been concern for a while that that implies that there is a process that decides whether
Not
properly applies. And in actual fact, it's a conversation between the local member and the officers as to whether or not they feel it needs panel consideration. So John's asking if we just tidy up that delegation and take out the word properly, so that it's clear that it is just down to the conversations with the local member.
Yeah, well,
The 3 delegations, Chair, which if you support them as a committee today, they go through to council for ratification, as John says, and then the institution.
well, from my perspective, I can support the change because I've served in the Rights of Way panel. And you'll be amazed that an application came up, I don't mind telling you, it came up in my division. And we gently looked back at an old map, found what was like a private right of way. It didn't go anywhere, just went to a house. And the gentleman found this old map, wanted it to be a public right of way. So the Rights of Way panel refused it. He then appealed to the Secretary of State, because this right of way didn't go anywhere, so it wasn't way to sort of go on a route round anywhere, just went to a full stop, so yeah, come back. And the Secretary of State overruled the Rights of Way panel. So I found that very disappointing because we use common sense on the panel. But the Secretary of State saw fit to overrule. So I think these changes are necessary, and hopefully we'll get less appeals going to Secretary of State.
I'll second it.
Yeah,
So is everyone in favour of these changes?
once it speeds things up, that's great.
Yeah.
All in favour?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
brilliant.
you very much. You have your approval.
Fantastic.
Turn on to 9, there's now back to Debbie, she's fresh faced after her holiday, so welcome back, Debbie.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. So this report presents the annual outturn report, which contains the annual audit opinions for the control environment in the council. It's one of my longer reports that I do present, so I'll try not to bore you and talk to you very quickly through the process. So we are required to have 4 internal audit services each year to deliver an annual internal audit opinion, and that feeds into the annual governance statement. So it is a very important report that we are sort of hearing today. So the annual report incorporates the audit opinion, the summary of work that supports the opinion, as well as a statement on conformance with the public sector internal audit standards. So, as you'll be aware, the internal audit plan for 22-23 was approved by this committee back in April 22. And as you all know, from time to time, and we do have to be flexible, the audit plan is flexed to take account of any emerging risks. So there will be some audits that fall away by the end of the year, and there will also be new additional items added to the audit plan where internal audit are asked by services to get involved. A couple of those areas, additional areas that we've looked at during the year, has been around procurement activities for COVID-19, and our work will feed into the national COVID inquiry group that is in place at the moment. You'll also be aware during the year we've presented to you some work in relation to our local authority trading company Nexus, and also we do get involved in any sort of new IT digital developments as well that the services feel fit that we would want to look at revised processes. Overall though, with all the various ins and outs that go on throughout the year, we have met our key performance target of delivery of the audit plan. The target is 90% and we have exceeded that, and I'll talk a little bit more about our KPIs a bit later on in this presentation. Also, just to bring to members' attention as well, is that as we like to work with services and we don't like to impose ourselves too much on services, we do sort of time our work to fit in with them. So from time to time, our work will come towards the end of the financial year, and as you can appreciate, because of COVID, a lot of our work in 22-23 came in the latter part of quarter four. So it's not unusual for some work to remain at draft report at the time of writing this report. However, the audit team will continue to progress all draft reports to final, and we are nearly there at this moment in time. You'll see at paragraph 6 on page 24 of your pack a very quick summary of various controls that we've evaluated during the course of the year and those that are marked as adequate, partial and weak. You may ask a question around that the number of controls we've evaluated is slightly lower than previous years, and that is really because we've implemented a new audit management system, which how we present our work programme, we've amalgamated some of the controls. So it looks like we may have looked at less controls, but we've tested the same. It's how the work programme is formulated in our new audit management system. So I looked at that, thought it was quite an interesting stat to look at. Okay. Well, I ticked that one. So on page 25 of your pack sort of sets out a bit more detail in terms of how we produce our reports. So our reports are given substantial, adequate or limited assurance, and for the purposes of our outturn report, we carve up our audit plan into various categories, which are high risk areas, main financial systems, other systems, compliance reviews and special investigations. And as you'll be aware, in accordance with our reporting protocols, any limited assurance reports will be presented in full to this committee, and responsible officers are also requested to attend to give further information. We also monitor and we do report on high level recommendations as well, if you'll be aware, and that comes to your December audit standards committee. Right, so looking at the audit plan outcomes of 22-23, so that starts on page 26 of your pack. This refers to the high risk auditable areas, and you'll see in the table, paragraph 10, the work that is included within the high risk auditable areas for 22-23. And the plan, as you know, was approved back in April 22. So we looked at key things around digital projects such as the corporate file plan. We looked at the re-recruit system. We've also done various pieces of work around children's and families and cyber security, as you would expect us to look at. The opinions are contained within that table. It's pleasing to note there are no limited assurance reports being awarded, which is good news. Also, for where there is audit opinions of at least adequate or substantial, occasionally we do we make high level recommendations, and there's one high level recommendation being made, which was within the re-recruit application tracking systems report, and that related to the candidate portal and around some sensitive information that was being, well, could be accessed by people that actually there's no business need. So that has been rectified immediately. Turning to page 28 of your pack and the main financial systems, you will see there's a huge plethora of financial audits that we undertake each year, as you would expect. We want to give assurance over the financial management of the council. And you will see that there has been one limited assurance piece of work, and that is in relation to sales to cash and around the council's debt recovery arrangements. So this audit looked at both general debts and health and care client debts, and we have noted some improvements are required in relation to the debt recovery arrangements in place. That report is currently being discussed with management at the moment, and that will come to Audit Standards Committee once finalised. There was also one high-level recommendation being made within our financial systems reviews, and that related to the pensions IT system, Altair, and that related to an issue around separation of duties, where our ICT audit manager did some testing around conflicts of interest, and there were just a couple of roles that had a conflict in terms of setting up, people had the ability to set up members on the system, and also there was various payroll functions as well attached to that role, and ideally we would not want people to be able to set up a member of the pension fund and also have any dealings in relation to payroll. So that conflict has now been dealt with, just to give you some assurance. In terms of other systems audits, again, you'll see there's been no limited assurance reviews, which is pleasing to note. But on page 30 of your pack, you'll see that there are some high-level recommendations that are being made, and they're listed in the table at paragraph 18. As part of our audit work as well, where personal data is being used within a system, we will also complete a GDPR checklist to ensure that various processes are in place. And I've just noted at paragraph 20 that there were 16 systems audit reviews that incorporated the GDPR checklist, and a few low-level recommendations have been made in relation to that. Moving on to our compliance reviews, you'll see at paragraph 21 on page 31 of your pack what our compliance audit programme looks like. So we look at high schools, comfort funds, educational endowments, area district offices, residential homes and complex needs units. So again, it's a good mix of compliance reviews that we can take across a variety of establishments. And you will see there that one theme continues from last year, which is the number of limited assurance reports that are being awarded for schools. Paragraphs 22 to 25 of this report, which is on pages 32 all the way through to 35, sets out some of the key findings that we've highlighted within schools. And again, just to give you some comfort, both myself and the audit manager responsible for schools will continue to liaise and be represented at the Bursars Forum to sort of highlight to bursars what the key issues are and some areas of good practice that they will want to take back to their respective schools to implement. Because again, we can't look at all the schools each year. So we're hopeful that we can cascade and communicate key findings from our sample of audits that we take each year. Page 35 of your pack also sets out some of our findings from our other compliance reviews. And we'll see those in paragraph 26. Again, there's some low-level recommendations around separation of duties, control over inventory assets, and also some recommendations in relation to budgets. We continue to keep on our books our review of purchase of cash withdrawals following the large-scale irregularity that we had a couple of years ago. And again, there's some sort of low-level improvements that we've highlighted there. We have done a review of 2 residential homes which are operated by Nexus Care, and these are newly established arrangements. So as you would expect, there are some recommendations coming out of that review, and they're also detailed on page 36 at the top of your page there, because that has resulted in a limited assurance opinion being awarded. And again, we will work with the service to ensure that the relevant improvements are made. In relation to the special investigations category, this starts from paragraph 27 of this report. There is a full detailed report attached as appendix 2 within the confidential agenda item. So if you've got any questions, I'd be grateful if we could leave that until we're not filming, that would be great. However, what this report does set out is a very high level summary of our work in relation to county fraud. You will see that we have had financial losses of 166,000 this year. The majority of that financial loss is in relation to the one significant fraud that we've unfortunately had during the year, which related to send personal budgets. And again, members would have received that full report at the last Audit and Standards Committee. But again, if you've got any further questions in relation to that, happy to take that as part of part 2 confidential agenda items. In relation to the number of referrals that we've had during the year, we've had 35 of those, 16 of which relates to our own council business. The rest have been passed on to other local authorities. We do get an awful lot of housing benefit referrals that we do pass on to the respective districts, as you can imagine. And what I've noted then on page 38 of your pack, just to give members a flavour of the level of financial losses we've suffered over the last decade. So again, we've had a slight improvement on the level of financial losses, but again, it still remains quite high, but not material, because we do have a threshold materiality of 300,000. Okay. So how that all then fits into the overall audit opinion, we do have a methodology that we use. So we operate a pass-fail methodology. So within each category, we'd like 90% of the audits to receive or be awarded an adequate or higher assurance opinion. In relation to special investigations, there's a slight deviation to that methodology, where we look at both the level of the financial losses and also what control area was failing. So in relation to special investigations, we've awarded a 70% score, which is based on the value of the loss, and also we've deducted 10% for payment mechanisms because there were some issues and improvements required around how the personal budget was being paid and monitored and managed. So importantly now, in terms of our overall assessment, you will see at paragraph 35 of this report on page 39 of your document, the overall categories and what the percentage scores were awarded. So we have 2 failing categories in relation to the compliance reviews because of the number of limited assurance opinions being awarded in relation to schools largely, and also the special investigations category, which we've awarded a 70% percentage. As we have 3 out of the 5 categories passing, that then allows me to give an adequate assurance over the effectiveness of the organisation's governance, risk and control framework for 22 and 23, and that is consistent with previous years as well. So in summary, in relation to the work we've undertaken, we've done an awful lot of work. Our audit plan is risk-based. Our high-level auditable areas this year focused on those key aspects in terms of key corporate IT projects, such as the corporate file review, the new recruit application system, the new out-air pension system. We've also done a lot of work in relation to the Highways Transformation Programme, which you would have received a report at a previous audit committee. And also we continue to work with services where there are new service delivery models, such as the Household Waste Recycling Centre. And next year we will turn our attention to children's services and their revised processes following their transformation programme. We'll continue also to work with the Household Waste Recycling Service as well, because whilst their process is in bed, and also with some services transferring back within trust, and all the work with those services to ensure that they have robust processes in place. In relation to our financial audits, we'll continue in 23-24 to give good coverage over our financial systems. And also we'll continue to keep under review the issues at schools as well, and we will cascade our learning from our previous audit work from 21-22 and 22-23 to schools as part of the Bursa Forum.
Yeah, you have to breath, yes.
Yeah, really. And finally, whilst we have suffered some significant financial losses for 22-23, it does relate, like I said, to one key fraud. And again, we will work with that service area during next year. And we have a lot of time in the audit plan to assist that service to put in place revised processes to reduce the risk of that occurring again. And we'll continue to use data analytical tools as well to try and target and home in our resources for those areas that are most susceptible as well. Moving on to our performance measures, that's detailed at the bottom of page 42 of your pack. We only have a couple of KPIs around delivery of systems and compliance reviews, and also our client satisfaction survey results as well. And you will see that we have a general target across those areas of 90%. And you'll see in the table at paragraph 42 that we have met or exceeded our KPIs for 22-23. Finally, just moving on to our performance against the public sector internal audit standards. As stated at the beginning of this report, we have to give a statement on conformance with the standards. So these standards were introduced back in 2013. They subsequently been revised in 2017. We also have a local government application note, which was revised in 2019. And all public sector internal audit services are required to, one, conform to those standards and also measure ourselves against those standards. Ordinarily, that takes the form of a self-assessment each year that feeds into this report. However, every 5 years, we're expected to have an external assessment undertaken. The previous external assessment was in January 18, so we had a second external assessment back in January 2023. And again, the inspection report was presented at the March Audit and Standards Committee, and that gave a very positive and favourable outcome. We were awarded the highest category of pass, although it says generally conforms, that is the highest category that can be awarded. There are no areas of non-compliance or partial compliance, and there are no recommendations being made. There was one advisory action, which was to keep abreast of the standards as they are currently being consulted on to be revised during 23-24. So as you would expect, we're aware of that anyway, and we will keep abreast of those as we go through this financial year. So with that in mind, there are no impairments and restrictions in the scope of our work that stops me from delivering the annual audit opinion for 22-23. So that's all I'd like to say.
Thank you.
Happy to take any questions.
Yeah, I was before I take questions, I'd like to say a big thank you to Debbie. Obviously, Lisa has sadly fallen over, so she's not with us today. So I think we'd like to zoom in sending our speedy recovery to Lisa. She's had an issue with her health before, so to fall over as well. Not to be here today is most unusual. I think to get an external review, I mean, it should be a distinction, really, but to say adequate is it's squinting, really, isn't it?
Just getting the room back.
Getting them back. But the best thank you for myself. I think we've got a good team at internal audit, and to find that, I know it's 1,000, but I mean, that would have carried on if it weren't stopped. So I'm now pass over to Graham. Graham?
Thank you. Excellent report, Ellie. Couple of points. When you were talking about auditing schools, do you look to see that, particularly this is for secondary schools, that they budget down to the classroom level? Because I found when I was a school government chair of financial committees that actually that encouraged good management. So do you look to see whether budgeting goes down to much lower levels?
We do look at the model used. auditing those quite high level in terms of how it's monitored and reported, but we do look that the budget has been approved and the model, how they've actually applied that. I don't know whether that goes down to classroom model. I can find out for you.
It would be nice if we recommended that it did go down to classroom level to stop some people spending their budget early on and then asking for more later off those that have time. So I just found that in the past it's led to better management of the financial management. So my second point is in the table on page 36, you've almost 2,000 travel passes have been withdrawn. Is that because somebody's changed address or is that because they've been naughty?
That is matched against deceased data.
That's
Yeah.
that's fine. Thank you very much. That's it. Thank you. Excellent report.
Thank you, Graham. Bill?
Thank you, Chair. And I'll concur with excellent report. Can we just look at page 20, the table on page 26, please? And he talks about the children's and families transformation plan decision making arrangement. So it's a draft report with managed substantial insurance. And then the one underneath says cancelled due to internal review and further revision to their operating model. Can you just give me some background? I don't if I've got to be honest here, I don't really understand it.
Okay. So in the audit plan, we had a piece of work to look at the new district model. However, during 22-23, I think it was sort of found that they needed to make some further revisions as part of the transformation programme work that was done. So as a result, certain service was doing their own internal review to look at how things were working, whether processes were being embedded or whether they needed to make any further revisions following the transformation programme. As those revisions are taking place when we wanted to do the piece of work, we thought it was best to defer that piece of work to the 23-24 audit plan. So that's a piece of work that we're now going to do in this current financial year because they were looking to make some further revisions. So if we can and audited it could be looking at stuff that's potentially going to change.
Okay, I look forward to that report. Thank you.
Richard?
Yeah, it's following on really from a particular table. I always concern myself with high risk reviews and how you actually manage to get them to a medium risk or something of that nature. So in terms of the work programme involved, so if we were looking at a previous report, were these items still high risk or are we just seeing ongoing going forward? I'd like to see them disappear at some point, if that makes sense.
If they're high risk, they're high risk. They have to manage them appropriately.
So if I can just give you a bit more detail.
Yeah,
So
Learning curve, Graham.
as part of the annual audit planning process, we identify lots and lots of areas. We go across all the directorates and we give that area a score, and that will be based on how large a service area is by way of volume of transactions and the budget. We look at the impact that service would have on the delivery of meeting the strategic objectives of the council. We would look on the last time it was audited, what the opinion was, and also whether the systems were either manual or sort of electronic, and that then spews out a score. As you can imagine, the high risk areas have largely remained static each year, so things like cyber assurance are always going to be a high risk. Send has been a high risk service area for a number of reasons for a few years. So those areas won't necessarily disappear because it is based upon what the council sees as important. So when we say it's high risk, it's not because there's lots of issues and lots of control failures. It's just it's incredibly important for the council to function, that it makes sure it has its cyber security in place, that SEND, children's services, various transformation and digital are all operating correctly. So those don't disappear unless there's a big priority that crops up. It may dip a little bit lower than others.
Thanks for that clarification, appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Spews out. Nothing. There's a pass, and there's something on here on paragraph 21, we talk about confidence funds. What is a confidence fund?
Yes, so they are, I believe they're folk, I think that was 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Would you like to answer?
Yeah, so they are funds relating to social services requirements and particular establishments. So where we've sort of held money on behalf of those people and maybe invested it over a period of time and you know, allow them to spend it as they wish. So they amount to only a small number sort of total amount, and also a small number of funds as well.
So it's not our money, it's the people's money.
Yes, it's other people. Yes.
You think they're not confidence funds? I think the Japanese soldiers do the Korean War.
You can't manage the.
Just read every 4 years.
And the education endowment funds is where from time to time a school may get sort of sponsorship or donor monies that have come into the school, and again we do an audit to ensure that all that can be accounted for.
I'll bring it back over to you then, and then drive from town. Review the packages, I know about the risk presented, obviously, and we have it. The workshop.
So this is just a quick verbal update on behalf of Lisa. So first and foremost, she wanted to thank everybody who participated in the workshop. There was a number of important and good points coming out of that workshop, which we are taking forward. But Lisa wanted just to remind people who hadn't completed the self-assessment that unfortunately couldn't attend that workshop to make sure that's completed and passed back. Is it to yourself, Julie?
Yeah.
Yes. So if you haven't done the self-assessment and it was attached on an email, was it the other month? Yeah, this one from Mayor. Please complete that so we can also incorporate your comments and feedback into our work.
But only if we didn't attend the workshop.
Yes.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
No.
the self-assessment form isn't. Self-assessment form isn't. That's for all members, for identifying your own training needs. I'll reissue it to all members.
Yeah,
Well,
if you've got an MBA, you don't have to do it, or you're an accountant.
Well, I've got an MBA, so there you go.
There you go.
After the guys have finished, I haven't got an MBA. I haven't got an MBA. I haven't got one. I'm curious, guys. I've got thank you. I just want to report my thanks for the morning we said, and it was excellent. Thanks to Julie who put that particular, but it was for so many years these seem like a natural place for me to be. Workshops like that are absolutely vital, and thanks for doing that and sorting it. I really appreciate it.
So just to clarify then, so it's appendix C, which was your own knowledge and skills.
Yeah.
That has to be completed, so we can feed that into any future training program.
I'll reissue the introduction.
Yeah.
we might do it back again. There was a corporate governance update.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
You all out the session.
You have to excuse me, I haven't done the preparation for this report. So this report presents the Code of Corporate Governance for 2023 and also the resultant action plan following the review of our local code of corporate governance. So on page 49 of your pack and paragraph 1 sets out a bit more detail in relation to this report. So back in 2016, Sit for Solace publicised their delivery good corporate governance and local government framework. And in the County Council demonstrating that it delivers good corporate governance, we annually review ourselves against how we adhere to the various principles within the framework. You'll see at paragraph 1 there are 7 principles around integrity, openness, stakeholder engagement, transparency, etc., and also managing risk. So those are the type of things you'd expect good governance to incorporate. And also, what happens each year, the corporate governance working group will meet to look at how we adhere to the various principles. And as you will be aware, there'll be various developments, new initiatives, new projects that will come into play during the course of the year. Attached to the appendix 1, you will see how we believe we have met the various principles of the framework, and Lisa Freeze is highlighted in yellow where there's been either some new developments or some further updates in relation to actions that have previously been identified. So if I can ask you to turn to page 53 of your pack, this now sets out our local code of governance, and you will see that the County Council is committed to achieving good corporate governance. And as I've said, we demonstrate that by looking at the various 7 principles and how we adhere to them. So the Code of Corporate Governance is reviewed on an annual basis by the Corporate Governance Working Group, and again, these actions or various improvements are also recorded within this document. And this document also feeds into the annual governance statement as well. So you will see on page 57, in table 4, the various principles and how we are adhering to those. And the right-hand column sets out any further actions that will take place during 23-24. And it is this document where we've highlighted in yellow any sort of new developments, new initiatives, or any further enhancements to the principles. Yeah, perhaps taking questions in relation to that.
You've got it in the stock, so we want to then advance and 12, so if you like, maybe.
Okay.
Then report on the 12 to external audit.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, so back in October 22, SIPA updated their guidance in relation to what an effective audit committee will look like. And within that guidance, it set out the audit committee's role in relation to external audit. That is detailed on page 81 of your pack in the first paragraph, where it states that the audit committee's role should provide assurance over the external auditor team in relation to its independence, also receive and consider the work of the external auditor, and also support the quality and the effectiveness of the external audit process. One of the areas coming out from the workshop back in May was that we received as a committee the Financial Reporting Council's annual report on external auditors. So attached to this report is the FRC full report of a sample of audit firms. So in producing this report, the RFC looked at a sample of 6 audit firms across 20 audits. 6 of them were health bodies and 14 of them were local government. Chair, I'll take the report has been read in full. You may want to just cast over the results of the audit in relation to Ernst Young's. Obviously, that's our external auditors, and that's on page 112 of your pack. And what you'll see there are a few findings in relation to the quality of audit and where some improvements have been highlighted. It's quite an interesting read, this report, if I'm being honest, and as you would expect, they've drawn out various issues in relation to the timeliness of undertaking the external auditing of public bodies. That's probably the key thing that's coming out of this report, as would be expected.
Yeah.
I have to take back any, because I won't be able to comment on the specific.
Well, no, I think that all the recommendations that we just note the contents of the report, even if we've all read it, I think that's the question. So carry on, Kevin. If you're still used.
On to
Forward plan now.
forward plan.
Yeah. 131 to 142.
Yeah, so, this is the forward plan, standard agenda item. This is where we look forward to what's coming, to the future audit standards committees during 23-24. And again, it's the opportunity for members to, discuss or consider if anything else is required to be presented to the audit standards committee. So Chair, happy to take back any further agenda items as necessary.
I think we've got a full plan, in my opinion, but, if any members got anything they want to improve, please let me know, or even if not today, let me know in the future, yeah, it will be. Okay. Good. That brings when I have to ask William to leave us now, William. Thanks for indulging in today. Nice to see you again.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, can we have a 5-minute break?
Yeah, fine, yeah. Good. I think the first thing needs a break is dead.
On her behalf, we'll have a break.
Oh, yeah, it's got to do with the resolution, if that's all right. Who's the resolution? The board plan.
Yes. On the exclusion of profit, Chair.
Oh,
Exclusion of public, yes.
well, I'm not ready yet. You got the break for this.
Before we get to-
No, I've excluded the point, but I'm
Yeah,
not,
what do you
I'm not,
yeah.
I'm going to read it now, things have to plan with break. Oh, right. That point be excluded from the meeting for the following items of business that involve the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph of part 1 of schedule 12A as amended of local government act 1972 as indicated below. Thank you.
Yes,
Switch on.
agreed.
Everyone